My fiancé admitted he'd been feeling confused and was starting to like someone older. We'd been together for years, so I stayed calm and let him talk. He said it didn't mean anything yet, just feelings. I told him I understood. But that night, I made a decision he never expected, and by morning, everything was different. Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Marlowe. I'm 35, and I've always believed that the strength of a relationship isn't measured by how beautiful it looks when everything is easy. It's measured by what happens when something starts to shift. Not every uncomfortable truth needs to turn into a fight. Not every painful sentence needs to be interrupted. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is stay still long enough to hear what is actually being said, not just what the other person hopes it sounds like. That was the mindset I had carried into my relationship with him. We had been together for a little over 4 years, engaged for almost one. Our relationship was never loud or dramatic. We weren't the couple posting emotional declarations every week or breaking up and making up just to feel something intense. What we had was steady, predictable, and comfortable in the way something feels when you believe it has already chosen its direction. By the time he proposed, it didn't feel like a question that changed everything. It felt like the next step in something we had already been building. At least that was how it felt to me. Nothing in his behavior had prepared me for that conversation. There had been no major argument, no long distance between us, no obvious moment I could point to and say, "There, that was when it started." It happened during a quiet evening at home, the kind of evening where the lights are low, dinner is finished, and nothing feels dangerous because everything feels ordinary. He sat across from me, rubbing his thumb along the edge of his glass, not looking directly at me at first. I remember noticing that before I noticed anything else. His voice was careful when he finally spoke. "I need to tell you something," he said. I looked up. "Okay." He took a breath. "I've been feeling confused lately." At first I thought he meant stress, work, family pressure, wedding planning, the kind of uncertainty people sometimes get when their life is about to move into a new chapter. So I didn't panic. "What kind of confused?" I asked. That was when his eyes finally met mine. "There's someone else," he said. For a second, the room became too quiet. Not empty, not dramatic, just strangely distant, like I was suddenly watching the life we had built from across a pane of glass. His mouth kept moving, but my body had already understood the sentence before my mind finished processing it. He kept talking quickly after that, like he needed to control the shape of the moment before it grew teeth. "She's older," he said. "I don't even know what it is yet. It's not like anything happened. It's just feelings. Just feelings." People say that like feelings are small, like they are harmless until they become actions. But feelings don't appear fully formed out of nowhere. They build in quiet places. They are fed by attention. They are protected by secrecy. They become important long before anyone admits they are important. And by the time someone brings them into an engagement, they are no longer nothing. I didn't say that. I let him continue. He told me he didn't want to hurt me. He said that was why he was telling me now. Before it became something bigger, he said he still loved me, still cared about what we had, still believed in us. But every sentence had two meanings. The one he wanted me to hear was, "I'm being honest." The one I actually heard was, "I'm preparing you for the possibility that I may choose something else." He looked relieved when I didn't cry. He looked even more relieved when I didn't raise my voice. "I just wanted to be honest," he said softly. I nodded. "I understand." And I did. Not in the way he thought. I didn't understand it as a temporary confusion we could gently talk through until he found his way back to me. I understood it as a shift that had already happened inside him before he ever sat me down. He seemed to take my calmness as permission to keep explaining. "It doesn't change what I feel about us," he said. "I just needed to say it out loud. I thought hiding it would be worse." I looked at him then, really looked at him. The man who had once stood in front of me with a ring in his hand. The man who had talked about venues and guest lists and where we might live after the wedding. The man who had promised certainty, now asking me to make room for his uncertainty. And the strangest part was that he didn't seem cruel. That almost made it worse. Because cruelty would have been easier to reject. Cruelty gives you something sharp to push against. But this was wrapped in honesty, softness, and careful wording. It asked me to admire the confession instead of questioning what made it necessary. So I stayed quiet. He mistook that silence for patience. But inside me, something was already closing, softly, completely. The rest of that evening continued like nothing had changed, and that was the most unsettling part. He leaned back into the couch, his shoulders loosening, his tone lighter, like he had just navigated something difficult successfully, like honesty had solved the problem instead of revealing it. We talked about small things after that: what to cook the next day, a message his sister had sent, a show we had been watching. If anyone had walked into the room, they would have thought we were fine. But we weren't. We were sitting in two completely different versions of the same conversation. He believed he had opened a door that needed to be explored carefully. I understood that a door had opened, and it wasn't leading back to me. At one point, he even smiled, just slightly. "I feel better now that I told you," he said. I nodded again. "I'm glad." And I meant that too. Because the moment he said it out loud, it stopped being something hidden. It became real enough to stand between us, even if he still wanted to treat it like something manageable. He kept explaining, circling back to the same point in different ways. "It's not like I'm choosing her," he said. "It's not like anything happened. I just needed to be honest with you." Each sentence was carefully placed, like he was trying to build a structure where both things could exist at the same time. His feelings for someone else and his life with me. Maybe in his mind they could. Maybe he believed feelings were something you could manage, compartmentalize, and keep harmless as long as you named them gently enough. But relationships don't work like that. Not the kind we were supposed to be building. Because once your attention shifts, your choices begin to follow. And once your choices start moving, everything built on top of them shifts too, even if it still looks untouched from the outside. "You're really okay?" he asked at one point, studying my face more carefully. There was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes then. Not guilt, exactly, more like confusion. My reaction didn't match the outcome he had expected. "I'm okay," I said. And again, that was true. I wasn't okay because nothing had changed. I was okay because I understood exactly what had. He reached for my hand then, almost instinctively. I let him hold it. Not because I felt the same way anymore, but because I wanted to feel the difference. And I did. Something that used to feel like connection now felt like memory. Like I was touching the outline of a life that had already started pulling away from me. That was the moment I knew. We weren't standing in the same place anymore. Later that night, we got ready for bed like we always did. Same routine. Same quiet movements around each other. Same light turned off at the same time. He fell asleep quickly. I didn't. I lay there listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me, and for the first time that familiar sound didn't comfort me. It reminded me how peaceful he could be after handing me something that would change everything. There was no urge to wake him up, no need to ask more questions, no desire to dig deeper into what he felt, who she was, or how long it had been building. None of those answers would change what I already understood. People think decisions like that take time. They imagine long nights filled with doubt, weighing options, going back and forth between staying and leaving. But that's only true when something is unclear. This wasn't. He had already crossed a line, not physically, but internally. And once that happens, the relationship doesn't stay where it was, no matter how calmly you try to talk about it. I turned my head slightly and looked at him, at the man I was supposed to marry. The man who had just asked me, without saying it directly, to share space in his heart with someone else, even if only temporarily. And I realized something I hadn't expected to feel. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shattered in the way people describe heartbreak. I was done. Not in a loud, emotional way, but in a quiet, irreversible one, the kind where nothing needs to explode for everything to end. My eyes moved to the nightstand. The ring caught a small reflection of light from the window. For a second, I thought about all the things it represented, the plans, the certainty, the version of us that had existed before that conversation. Then I thought about what it represented now, a promise built on two people choosing the same future. And one of us had already started looking elsewhere. I didn't take it off yet. I just looked at it, letting the truth settle without forcing myself to make a scene out of it. For the first time since he gave it to me, the ring felt less like a promise and more like evidence of a promise that no longer had both people inside it. Beside me, he shifted slightly in his sleep, turning closer, his arm brushing lightly against mine. A familiar gesture, automatic, unconscious. And it didn't move me the way it used to. That was the confirmation I didn't need, but received anyway. I closed my eyes, not to escape anything, but to let the decision settle into place without resistance. Because once something becomes that clear, you don't need more time. You just need to follow through. And by the time the night ended, I already knew exactly what the morning was going to look like. The morning didn't arrive with drama. There was no sudden realization, no emotional wave crashing into me the second I opened my eyes, because the truth was that the change had already happened the night before. Morning simply gave it shape. I woke up before him. That wasn't unusual. I had always been the one who got up first, moving quietly through the apartment while he stayed asleep a little longer. But this time there was a difference. Not in what I was doing, in why I was doing it. I sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, letting the stillness settle around me. He was still asleep behind me, breathing evenly, unaware that the version of us he had gone to sleep with no longer existed. I stood up slowly and walked into the closet. I didn't rush, but I didn't hesitate either. Every movement had a purpose. I reached for my suitcase, and the sound of the zipper felt louder than it should have in the quiet room. He didn't stir. I paused for a second, not because I was unsure, but because I understood the weight of what I was doing. There are moments in life where your hands move calmly while your heart quietly records every detail, because some part of you knows you will remember this forever. Then I kept going. I didn't take everything. That wasn't the point. I took what was mine in a way that made the decision real. Clothes, personal items, the things that defined my presence in that space. I didn't touch anything that belonged to him. I didn't rearrange the room. I didn't create a scene. This wasn't revenge. It was reality catching up with what he had already told me. By the time I finished, the apartment looked almost exactly the same. If someone walked in, they wouldn't immediately notice anything missing. But I would, because I could feel the absence of myself in it. I closed the suitcase and stood there for a moment, listening. Still no movement from the bed. Still asleep. Still unaware. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed my keys, my phone, the small, ordinary things that never feel significant until they become the last things you take before leaving a life behind. Then I turned back toward the bedroom one last time. He hadn't moved. There was something almost surreal about that, how something so complete could happen without the other person even being awake to witness it. I stepped back inside quietly, walked over to the nightstand, and removed the ring from my finger. For one brief second, I held it in my palm. It felt smaller than everything it had once represented. There was no hatred in that moment, no satisfaction, no performance, only a quiet grief for the version of us that had been real to me, and maybe only partly real to him by the end. Then I placed the ring on the table, exactly where he would see it when he woke up. It was clear, undeniable, and finished. I picked up my suitcase and walked out. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No slam, no noise, just an ending that didn't need to announce itself. About an hour later, my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was him. I answered anyway. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. His voice wasn't angry. It was unsettled, confused in a way that told me he hadn't expected this. "My things are gone," he continued. "Why didn't you say anything before leaving?" I leaned against the wall of the hallway outside, suitcase still beside me. "I thought we were going to talk about this," he added. There it was, the version of events he had been holding on to. I let a small pause settle between us. "We did," I said. Silence. "I told you it didn't mean anything yet," he said, his voice tightening slightly now. "I know," I replied calmly. "That's why I made the decision now." Another pause, longer this time, because what I meant and what he expected weren't the same thing. "You're overreacting," he said, but there was no certainty behind it, no conviction, just an attempt to regain control of a situation that had already moved beyond him. "I don't think I am," I said, and I didn't. And this wasn't about reacting to what he might do. It was about responding to what he had already allowed to happen inside himself. He had stepped outside of us emotionally, and that matters. The conversation didn't escalate after that. There were no raised voices, no desperate attempts to force each other into agreement. Just two people standing in completely different understandings of the same moment. I thought we could work through it, he said quietly. For the first time, there was something closer to realization in his tone. We did, I replied. But this time, the meaning landed differently, because working through something doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means recognizing that what you had has already changed and refusing to pretend it hasn't. There was nothing left to add after that, so I didn't, and neither did he. The call ended naturally, like both of us understood there wasn't a version of that conversation that would bring us back to where we had been. I picked up my suitcase again and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back, not because it was easy, but because looking back would have asked a question I had already answered. The silence after the call stayed with me longer than the conversation itself, not because of what he said, but because of what he finally understood. Up until that moment, he thought we were still in the middle of something. A discussion, a phase, a situation that could be managed if we just kept talking carefully enough. But that call shifted something for him. I could hear it in the pauses, in the way his voice lost that soft confidence he had the night before, in the way he stopped trying to explain and started trying to catch up. I didn't go back to the apartment. That option didn't even cross my mind. Instead, I kept walking. The morning air felt sharper than usual, or maybe I was just noticing things more honestly now that there was nothing left to filter through. My phone buzzed again about 20 minutes later. I looked down. His name. I let it ring for a second. Then I answered. This time, he didn't start with a question. "Is this really happening?" he asked. There was something different in his voice now. Less confusion. More awareness. "Yes," I said. A pause. "You left," he said, like he was still trying to place the reality of it into something he could process. "Yes." Another pause. "You didn't even give me a chance to fix it." That was the first time he said something that almost sounded like regret, but I knew the shape of it. It wasn't regret for where he had let his feelings go. It was regret for the consequence. I leaned lightly against the side of a building, letting the sunlight hit my face. "You already had your chance." "Chance," I said. "When?" he asked quickly. "Before you needed someone else." Silence. Real silence this time. Not confusion. Not resistance. Impact. "I didn't choose her," he said after a moment, quieter now. "You didn't have to," I replied. "Then why does this feel like I did?" he asked. I closed my eyes for a second, because that was the first honest question he had asked, and it deserved an honest answer. "Because you let yourself get there," I said. "You didn't stop it when it was small. You didn't pull back when it started to matter. You let it grow until it became something you needed me to know." He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, so I continued. "And once it reaches that point, it's already real." The line stayed between us, heavy, unavoidable. "I told you because I didn't want to lie to you," he said. "I know," I answered. "And that matters." It did. I wasn't pretending it didn't. Honesty matters. But honesty doesn't erase what it reveals. It only gives the other person the chance to respond to it. And I had. "I thought you'd fight for us," he said quietly. That was the moment. The one that would have pulled me back if I hadn't already moved forward. I opened my eyes. "No," I said. "I fight for something when both people are still in it." Another pause. Shorter this time, because there wasn't much left to misunderstand. "I am still in it," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. I let that sit for a second, then I answered calmly. "You were, until you weren't." No anger, no edge, just the truth, exactly where it belonged. He exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. I could almost picture him standing in the apartment, looking at the ring on the table, trying to match that image with the version of events he had expected when he woke up. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said. "I know," I replied, because from his perspective, it wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be a conversation, a moment of honesty, a careful step toward figuring things out together, not the end. But that's the difference between managing a feeling and recognizing a shift. "I don't want to lose you," he said. And for the first time, there was something real in his voice. Not controlled, not structured, just real. I felt it. Of course I did. You don't spend years building something with someone and feel nothing when it breaks. But feeling something doesn't mean you go back. It means you understand the weight of what you're leaving behind. I think you already did, I said gently. That was the final line, not because it was meant to end the conversation, but because there was nothing left after it. He didn't respond right away, and I didn't fill the space for him. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. Are you coming back? He asked. No assumptions now. No control. Just a question. I looked ahead at the street, at the people moving past me, unaware that my entire life had just shifted without making a sound. No, I said. Simple. Final. And this time, he understood. The call ended not long after that. No goodbye, no dramatic closure, just an ending both of us finally recognized. I lowered my phone slowly and stood there for a moment, not because I was stuck, but because I wanted to feel it fully. The absence, the ache, the strange calm that comes when something painful also feels right. Then I pushed myself off the wall and kept walking. A few weeks later, everything settled. Not dramatically, not in a way that demanded attention. It settled the way dust settles after a door has been closed for good. There were no late-night messages trying to reopen the conversation, no long paragraphs asking for another chance, no sudden realizations delivered too late. The distance didn't have to be enforced. It existed on its own. I moved into a new place, smaller, quieter, mine. There was something grounding about walking into a space where every object, every corner, every quiet moment belonged only to me. No shared routines, no invisible expectations, no version of a future that depended on someone else choosing the same direction. At first, people expected me to be more affected. They asked careful questions. Are you okay? Do you miss him? Was it really that serious? And I understood why. From the outside, it didn't look like anything had happened. There was no betrayal anyone could point to, no single moment they could replay and say, that's where it broke. But that's the thing about emotional shifts. They don't always leave evidence. Sometimes they exist in what someone allows themselves to feel, in where they let their attention stay, in the private choices they make before anything visible happens. And sometimes that is enough. I didn't explain that to everyone. Most people don't need that level of detail. So I just said, I'm okay, and I was. Not because it didn't matter, but because I didn't ignore what it meant. Every now and then I would think about him. Not in a way that pulled me backward, just as a memory that still had shape. I would remember the early years, the stability, the quiet certainty we had built together, and I didn't hate him. That was something I noticed early on. There was no anger sitting underneath everything, no resentment that needed to be fed, because he didn't lie to me. He told me the truth, and that truth gave me something many people don't get in situations like that: clarity before damage, distance before betrayal. An ending before things turned into something harder to leave. I saw him once, by accident. It was in a cafe, late afternoon, the kind of place we used to go together sometimes. He didn't see me at first. He was sitting alone, looking down at his phone, his expression different, quieter, less certain. I stood there for a second, just observing. Not with longing, not with regret, with the strange tenderness you sometimes feel toward a life that used to be yours, but no longer knows your name. This was someone who had once been my future, and now he was just someone I used to know. He looked up eventually. Our eyes met. There was a flicker of recognition, then something softer. Understanding. He didn't get up, didn't come over, and I didn't either, because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. That was the moment I knew, without any doubt, that I had made the right decision. Not because of how he looked, not because of what he might have been feeling, but because of how I felt, steady, unmoved, free in a way that didn't need to prove itself. I left the cafe without speaking to him, not out of avoidance, out of completion. And as I walked away, I realized something that stayed with me long after that day. It wasn't the fact that he had feelings for someone else that changed everything. It was what that revealed about where we actually stood. Because once someone tells you they're starting to feel something for someone else, the relationship doesn't stay where it was, even if nothing has happened yet. And once you understand that clearly, you don't wait for it to become something more. You act on what it already is.